There we go. Wonderful. So we'll just wait for a few more people and then we will get going. I will have the chat box open. My style of teaching is very off the cuff. If you have any questions, throw the chat in, and I will also circle back in the end to touch base. There's a few more people. Welcome. All right. So it's just 5 after 1, and we have a few more people, I think, registered, but again, we're recording the session and I'm really excited to be here. My name is Tracy Pepe. I am a perfumer of 35 years in the industry per se. And behind me is my orchestra, some of the stuff in my lab and the work that I do. And I wanted to do a course or a seminar today on why we need to update our scent-free policy. And I'm going to take you back to where this kind of happened in Canada and what's changed, what hasn't changed, and why do we need to go forward. And I'm hoping that I'm going to ask some questions and you're going to sit back and say to yourself, I never thought of it that way. And that's my goal. So it may be a little disruptive, but that's my objective because there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to this particular subject. So let's get started. I'm going to share the screen. Microsoft. Wonderful. Okay. So our goal is to speak about a scent-friendly policy. And what does that mean? And I love this image because she's smelling a very toxic flower. And quite often when I start these types of seminars, I always talk about chemicals and I talk about naturals. And rattlesnake venom is probably as natural as you're going to get, and you certainly don't want to get bit by it. And organic chemistry is often misunderstood. And in the industry of fragrance and the industry of cosmetics, there's fantastic marketers and branders that turn it all upside down and create a lot of confusion. And what that has done is it's led us down this path where we have scent-free policies. And so I want to create what we are moving forward is more of a scent-friendly policy to understand why you don't want to ban scent, but why you want to be conscious of the types of scents, but how to implement it and actually what does it look like. So how did we get here? It started really in 2000. The New York Times created this article called Canada Sniffs and Dislikes. The Wall Street Journal has a City Smells perfume. It was interesting because I had just launched my book. When I was pregnant with my second child, I wrote a book about scent-free zones and what was happening within the industry. And it was specifically to North America at the time. And it was early in my career and I decided that I was going to work on this. And something changed in Halifax, and the Globe and Mail actually, and I put the link up because it's a fascinating article. It's an old article, but it was really talking about multiple chemical sensitivities. And a young student was using Dippity-Doo hair gel, and it was a teacher who basically said that she was allergic to fragrance, and he kept coming in with Dippity-Doo hair gel, and she got really angry. Because we know teenagers can be defiant. And so she suspended him, but then she made the principal implemented charges, which was interesting because they went a little far. And so the RCMP were the only police in this small town outside of Halifax. Anyway, this was before social media. This was before we got onto Facebook and TikTok and all that great stuff. Anyway, so the old-fashioned New York Times and the Wall Street Journal did this article. And the fragrance industry was uproaring because the majority of the fragrance industry is in New Jersey and in New York, for people who don't understand that. The marketers and the branders are in New York. The manufacturing is usually done in Jersey. So I had multiple calls and multiple questions, and they asked me if I could address this because there was a national-wide media campaign. This is how I became media savvy very quickly. And so this is kind of where it started. And multiple chemical sensitivity has been rejected as a legitimate organic disease by most doctors and most researchers across Canada and the US, and nothing has changed since the state. But the MCS, which stands for multiple chemical sensitivity, started. There's over 1 million Canadians that have been diagnosed. Up to 72% are women and close to 50% are seniors. And that's Statistic Canada from 2020. There's no reported deaths from scent exposure anywhere in the world. There are lawsuits, have been lawsuits relating to termination of employees because there is a scent-free policy and the employee chose to wear fragrance. The diagnosis is provided by nonprofit and organization, and nothing has happened from a medical or government organization, such as Health Canada or the Canadian Medical Association. So to date, the focus is now on loss of smell and taste from COVID, which is interesting. So the media and the research is shifting. But for 22, 23 years, this is what was the focus, is what was multiple chemical sensitivity and what was the fragrance? Is it a trigger? Is it a health issue? So from that time period, nothing has changed, meaning there is no medical research, scientific diagnosis, nothing has come out of it, which is very interesting to me because the industry has gotten stronger in research. And actually, there are more institutions from hospitals, universities studying this, studying scents, studying olfaction than there has been ever. So this is kind of where we started, and how this started became this media that the basically HR decided, well, you know, I don't want to, we have to put scent policies in. So we'll just ban fragrance. We'll just ban scent. Sounds like a reasonable idea. However, it's kind of created a problem, and it's created a real problem in certain areas in healthcare. And so why? Well, scent increases. These are some of the issues these are the changes. This is the research. This is what we're looking at. And it's hard. I gotta move my top. Oh, there we go. So basically, scent increases insomnia, meaning if you have loss of smell and loss of taste, if you use scent, you recover. That is one of the only treatments that is actually known to be successful. Steroids don't work, and specifically this was highlighted with COVID-19. The increased olfaction reduces scent sensitivities, which is interesting. So they're starting to see that if you actually use scent more regularly, and I mean scent, and we'll get into the types of scent, you actually reduce your sensitivities, because it's almost like the premise of more exposure specifically versus cutting it off. And then this is where we get, for example, superbugs. When you eliminate everything, you get strength in certain other bacteria and so forth. Scent is very similar. Now, scent increases memory retention, specifically a study in seniors, by 236%. And so there's a lot of research on cognition, which is the work that I specialize on, and what is happening with when you use scent and how do you use it effectively with the brain. There's thousands of studies using scent with cognition, brain activity, human behavior globally. This is by major universities and medical institutions. We're starting to see a lot of serious research on early stages of diagnosis from individuals who lose their sense of smell, which is an indicator with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and over 76 different diseases can be detected by scent moleculars. 30 years in North America, retailers, airports, subways, hotels, over conventions centers are targeted with custom scents. So there's never been a health claim or lawsuit because an individual has walked into a Gap store or a theater or an airport. And I have a colleague who's scenting the New York subway station. So the areas with higher scent-free zones, which this is the interesting stuff, are in North America, specifically California, East Coast Canada. However, the consumption rate of scented products, natural scent-free, is the highest consumption rate in the world. So what does that mean? This is the area of the market research and the data that I kind of find interesting. The labeling and the marketing suggests that because it's scent-free, because it's natural, in things like Febreze or detergents or fabric softeners, these are the areas that have the highest consumption of it. And yet we will discuss, and I will show you how there's no such thing as a scent-free product, especially those. The industry itself, so myself and the colleagues and the perfumers, we have been studied multiple times. There is no increase of cancer deaths of any types of cancer. Now, I smell as a perfumer anywhere from 10 to 20,000 different raw materials on a given day. And I'm not even a technical or a classified or chemical perfumer like there are in some of the largest corporations. And these organizations, they're around all types of raw materials, and they're smelling on a consistent basis at very close. And so this is another indication for us where we look at this as almost to say, I hate to say it, but like I'm the human guinea pig, the amount of aromas that I consume and smell on a daily basis. So this is the industry itself versus where we've come from. And wait, now where are we? On any given day, we smell over 10,000 different smells. Just waking up, being in our own homes, walking out into your patio, and it doesn't really matter. On average, this is what you're smelling. The threshold of which your body or your brain interprets those smells really depends on a few things. Intensity, parts per million, which is the way we, as in the science industry, we track a fragrance. It's how many molecular structures are within parts per million within oxygen. So there's an actual data that we track. And your perception of smell, as well as how good of how much have you used your sense of smell and your sense of taste. So these are the things that are really interesting. And often I have them, I have a molecular chemical breakdown of the smell of skunk. And sometimes I take it and I pass it around, and it is 0.0001% dilution of the actual skunk odor. Now in North America, I can do this because skunks are from North America, but generally if I'm in another country, they wouldn't know the scent. And most people find this scent at a very low threshold wonderful because it's an animalistic scent. And most animalistic scents have a sexual tone to them, and they're actually quite pleasant. But a skunk, as we all know, at an extreme level is really strong, and it's a little too much. In fact, it's way too much. And God forbid if you have a dog who gets sprayed by a skunk and then it comes in the home, it becomes overwhelming to the point that it's a defense mechanism. That's the whole purpose to it. However, how do you choose what smells are okay and what smells are not okay out of those 10,000? And whether you're putting them in purposely or not, that's the average amount of scent moleculars if you looked at what you were breathing on a daily basis. So let's talk about olfaction, because this is really what this is about. Dr. Luca Turin is a fantastic researcher in my industry, and he actually determined that smell is not a molecular structure. It has a molecular structure, but how we smell is based on bees. And bees are attracted to the vibration from the scent. And if you think of music or sound, sound and smell are almost identical from the way the body perception and how it is transmitted within the body. And so even though these scent chemicals, as we call them, enter through the brain, and as they are going through the nose, they hit the cilia, which is that blue area. The receptors pick it up. It immediately pushes it into that soft pink area, which is the old brain, which is home to the limbic system, this is where the fascinating part comes for emotional intelligence and the connection with how scent works with the body. Because truthfully, the vibration is sending a message to the emotional triggers of how we feel. And so this is the key area to why people respond to a smell in a loving way, but also in a very extreme way. So there's a positive, but there's also a negative to this. And the industry pays attention to dogs, incredible research that they do, and how they're used. And his nose is flaring. And when his nose flares, he is actually creating a scope of how his perception is. And as a dog, he smells anywhere from 800 to 1,000 times greater than we do. Labs in particular are used to train for the smell of diseases and what cancer smell like, for example. We know them to be used for search and rescue, cadaver dogs. We know they're used in drug therapy. Like there's all kinds of things that they're doing with canines and canine research. And canine research is the tipping point because of their ability as a super smeller to actually pick up these smells. Humans aren't. And historically speaking, humans naturally don't really use their sense of smell. We are more visually cued. And so for people who have a sensitivity per se to a certain scent, they could have a heightened sense of smell. That is one explanation. They could also have a sensitivity to types of scent categories, which are difficult to determine. But it is an explanation to the emotional response to certain smells, because you're going to find certain smells in certain products where you're not going to find other smells in certain products, because chemically we wouldn't work with them as in the perfume industry. So sensitivities versus allergies is an incredibly important part to the story, because allergies trigger the immune system response. The substances are usually put on as a chemical or a liquid onto the arm specifically, or the back. They're ticked off, the blood is received, and the endocrinologist does the testing. Allergy testing is a very complex testing, and it shows up. Shows up actual chemical results. You are allergic to dandruff. You are allergic to pollen of certain types, food allergies. Allergies become life-threatening or can become life-threatening as the symptoms increase, and an allergy responds to an EpiPen when it becomes that way. Scent sensitivities don't. And what's really interesting on a scent sensitivity is they're usually self-diagnosed. There is no doctor that actually, an individual would go into a doctor's office and they would smell smells to determine your sensitivities. And the interesting thing about that is the diagnostic process. There is a massive difference between an allergic reaction to a scent or a scent substance, I'm going to reframe that, versus a sensitivity. Now, the body's immune auto response system, this is the tricky part, is the same. So, for example, let's talk about a peanut allergy. If you have a peanut allergy, your throat can close off and you could die. And the body knows that the smell of peanuts is a trigger point. And so the body actually protects the person, and especially if the peanut allergy has been present as a child, that if they smell peanut oil, they can actually go into early allergic response or sensitivity shock, not even having any contact with the peanut. And so this is something where we know that the memory, the scent is actually, it's designed, because our brains are really intelligent that way from a primal standpoint, that certain smells are actually warning us that this is danger and it's bad for our body, it's bad for us. Sensitivities and allergies, though, are very different. And so most people who say I'm allergic to fragrance mean they have a sensitivity to a scent, because they can't really be diagnosed to an allergy, a scent allergy, because if you look at the actual scent from a chemistry standpoint, there is no allergen in a scent molecule. So this is where our industry kind of scratches our head and says, okay, where is this happening? Why is this occurring? This is where multiple chemical sensitivity came in as a general diagnostic of various different chemicals that we breathe in. And that is true for some circumstances. However, when it comes to the smell, the information in the industry is really leaning towards that the scent is the trigger. It's a triggering response. And some of these responses, by any means, I am not toning them down. I know some people can get sick to their stomach. I know some people can get migraines. I know some people's irritability rate can just like be very extensive. Some people can get anxiety attacks from certain scents because they feel claustrophobic. They feel very frustrated. This is all very real. And so in a work environment place, you don't want that to happen. And what we've learned through the industry, that there are certain things that we can avoid that will avoid those triggers. So how would you enforce a scent policy? And this is one question that I really like to ask corporations in particular, because this is a challenging one. The number one fragrance, or the highest level of fragrance in any kind of man-made product, are laundry detergents, laundry softeners, soaps. And these systems are formulated in a way where you have what is called a QUAT system. There's 4 requirements, and that's why it's called a QUAT. And these systems are basically fats and alcohols that get together. And the combination of the fats and alcohols is how you get soap, which then removes dirt, which removes odors, which removes issues from clothing and various different things. Now, these QUAT systems are pretty horrific in smells. The odors to them, when you mix them together, they're almost unbearable. And so the industry has to first create the QUAT system, and what they have to do is neutralize the odor with a fragrance chemical compound to remove the odor. Because you don't want your clothes to smell dirty. That would defeat the purpose. Even though it removed the dirt or the mud, part of the cleanliness is the experience that it smells fresh. Smelling fresh is a chemical, is a perfume-made interpretation. And every culture has a different interpretation. And that's why certain soaps smell very different in South America than they would do in England versus smelling in North America. And Gain is a really good example. Gain is a detergent that is specifically designed for South America because their intensity to fragrance is a lot. They love intense fragrances versus what it is sold here. But because we have such a diverse population and different cultural background, Gain is now sold through North America, even though it has been on the market for over 20 years in South America, because we have people who enjoy that fragrance. This is where we have the chemists or the perfumers take the quat system, they neutralize it. And then moving forward, they then add the branding signature scent of the story of what they're selling. So is it Fresh Breeze? Is it Tropical Rain? Is it Lavender Lush? Whatever it is, then the intensity of the fragrance is then changed and then determined based on the marketing. The amount of research our industry has understanding that the only way you really purchase a detergent is by taking the cap off and smelling it. There are certain extensions of branding. For example, Tide has a stronger quat system for cleaning, and so that's why it's more expensive. But generally speaking, most consumers are choosing their detergents based on what it smells like in the transition and if they're going to have that fresh clean. So back to scent-free policies. Everybody is washing their clothes, and so the most fragrant materials are on your clothes. How would you determine if those are going to be acceptable in a scent-free policy or not? How do you determine a good scent versus a bad scent? This is another question within the policy. Is vinegar a good scent, but Windex is a bad scent, even though that both of these do the same thing of cleaning the window? And how do you determine if that is being used or not being used? And so this becomes a really interesting question, because if you're determining the product based on the smell, not based on the objective, especially when you're dealing with things like bacterias or viruses or so forth, the scent is going to be an issue, because the perception of smell of good versus bad is something that North Americans do quite a bit, versus other cultures where scent is actually intricate in their lives, the way they introduce, for example, perfume, eau de toilette, colognes to children, versus in North America, we don't do it until we're much older. And then you give a young teenager a male Axe spray, and you get, we call this in the industry shotgunning, where they've come to work or school and they're covered in it, but they wouldn't even consider taking a shower. This is that's a different scent tolerance, or a good scent or a bad scent. So this becomes a really interesting challenge. And again, back to the work policy or the environment policy, how do you determine that? Perfume, eau de toilette, parfum, scent, aroma chemical, fragrance material, they're all wording and they're all very different classifications. The problem is everyone assumes this is the same, and it's not. Parfum is a concentration level that actually the industry doesn't even sell anymore because it's too expensive and most consumers won't pay for it. Perfume is an alcohol-based solution in the cosmetic industry. There's a lot of variations depending on where it's made, depending on who makes it, and depending on the quality of the raw materials. Eau de toilette is a version of perfume, but with less raw materials and less product, which I always find interesting. And I started off in the perfume industry, and that's why I'm not there anymore, because as a perfumer, we're limited. And so you think of us as a chef, that you give us a variety of materials and you say, okay, this is how much you can work with. You have to make a fantastic experience for a consumer. And you look at what you've been given, but you've been given 5 cents versus the volume or the value of the dollar of the bottle of fragrance. And that fragrance sells for 100 and you gave me 5 cents. And you want me to make this spectacular. And yet at least 85% of the production is in marketing. And then out of that, we get 5% that goes into the packaging, and then 10% that goes into the bottle. I have nothing to work with, and yet I'm creating the raw material. That's one of the reasons why a lot of traditional fragrances smell the same. That's why in the last 20 years, the industry has been dropping, because consumers are, quite frankly, bored of what is provided. There's a huge difference from a Chanel No. 5 that was created by one of the best chemist perfumers in the world, who innovated a fragrance, versus some of the stuff that's coming out now. Extremely different, extremely. And that's why classics are very different than what's happening now. And quite often, some of the fine fragrances that you come across, or a perfume or a cologne that you buy, and a year from now, you won't be able to buy it. So these are cosmetics. A scent is a raw material or aroma or a scent that has a molecular structure to it, and it can be associated to anything. It's actually a descriptor. And for MSDS, part of an MSDS is the description of the olfaction of the raw material that's in this MSDS. That's one of the indicators. An aroma chemical is basically a terminology that we use that has a chemical, it has a high level of esters, that's what we're looking for. And then fragrance materials are materials that create those aroma chemicals. So for example, lavender creates lilial acetate, which is an aroma chemical. And the reason why I've kind of broken each step down to you is, in my world, they're all extremely very different. In the general public, the difference is natural versus synthetic. That's really how it kind of breaks down, and who decides and what is next. So when you have natural versus synthetic, the conclusion of most consumers is an essential oil, which is what I love to specialize in, is the number one safety. It's okay. However, what people don't realize is there's a huge percentage of essential oils that is actually banned by Health Canada. And direct application is not approved. Things like tea tree oil, there's actually a warning on Health Canada's website, because they were overused, and it's something that people have constantly, oh yeah, just put tea tree oil directly on your head or your, and then it gets into this situation where they use it for lice, for example, for children. And then someone makes a decision they're going to put it on dogs for ticks and fleas. Well, the difference with the dog is the dog can't, and the reason why I'm doing this, I have a huge Saint Bernard over here, but a dog doesn't have the capacity within the liver to metastasize the essential oil, and a small dog can actually get very sick and die. My dog is 200 pounds. He wouldn't get sick, but Gordon is around my smells all the time, and from a smelling standpoint, his tolerance to it, it's not going to hurt him, but you can't put it on directly on their skin. And it actually will burn their skin as well. So back to natural versus synthetic. The perception is, because it's natural, the marketing is it's organic, the marketing is it's plant-based. It doesn't really mean anything, to be totally honest with you, because there's a lot of natural chemicals, raw materials. And crude oil is actually from our natural organic chemical sense, and that creates a lot of the toxins and pollutions in the world. So the definition of natural versus synthetic really gets caught up within the marketing and gets caught up with the branding. And there's even now natural perfumes, and I'm sure you've seen the last one I saw recently, again, is Febreze. They have natural Febreze. And I thought that was very interesting marketing. So natural base smells of Febreze. Febreze has 56 patents. It's one of the best chemical formulations on the market to capture odor and to capture odor content. And what Febreze does is it goes around the molecule and it contains it so there's no vibration, so you can't smell it. If you touch it and you move the Febreze or the molecular structure that's holding it, it breaks, and then you have to add more Febreze. So at one point they had a Febreze scent, and it was the first time in 25 years that our industry had a new category, because consumers would refer to it as a Febreze smell, which is a natural smell, which is interesting because there's no natural raw materials in it whatsoever. but the chemistry behind it is quite fascinating on how it holds a smell and removes it from an environment, thus creating scent-free. And so I'm hoping you are starting to see the story where logically having a scent-free policy is something that can't really be enforced, but is very difficult to implement. And so it creates this question is, why would you ban scents? Well, the reason why is at one time there was a sensitivity aspect to it. There also is a very strong argument for cancer patients that certain smells, and sometimes they don't know what the scents are, and they can't bother to explain it. And from an empathy standpoint, you're just going to try to do anything you can. Cancer patients have an intolerable because it impacts their olfaction, their olfactory, and that's why food is sometimes very challenging for them. And so in hospital units, they were putting up to avoid fragrances. And really what they were trying to say is to put up triggers, heavy duty fragrances that can create triggers. However, cleaning products are required specifically with bacterias, infections, odors, deodorants. These types of things are needed to remove negative odors. And so the question comes is, why would you ban scents? It may be the types of scents. It also may be the types of products, but this also requires a little more information on. So I think this is where we get into the source of scents and the application. So there's a few things that I always like to do, and when I'm trying to help people revise a scent-free policy to a scent-friendly policy, is you're looking for plants or smells that are derived from plants. Plants are a good source of aromas, but they're free from alcohols and solvents, and they're not diluted. And this is something that you can look for on a packaging. Phosphates, alcohols, and solvents. These are things that you can ask. And there's a lot of, especially with cleaning products, there's a lot of eco-friendly, and there is actually category requirements to hit an eco-friendly cleaning product. And these eco-friendly cleaning products do not contain phosphates. And it's interesting because even in the liquor store now, to this day, you can go and buy wines without phosphates. So they do understand that phosphates have an impact. They do create headaches. They do create a sensitivity within the body, and the body does not respond to them. Ethical considerations. Animal-based products or endangered-based products are things that we don't work with at all, but generally have extremely high aromas. And so things that the animal-based products are things that, back to the skunk, that have an extreme, they're more heightened, they're much more heightened. Again, back to the soaps, fat, it's usually animal fat. So these are things that we look for. These are the types of reasons in the products that we kind of lean away from. Regulatory compliance. Most fragrances have to meet an organization standards by IFRA, which is the International Fragrance Regulatory Association. It's outside of Europe. It's one of the strongest regulatory compliance. Canada has under their Health Canada Act, and then the FDA is below that. These requirements are available. All manufacturers, co-packers follow these requirements, and you can check just by labeling the types of products that you're using. So cleaning products require certain chemicals to meet standards. However, there are many, as we talked about, eco-friendly, and eco-friendly is not a marketing term. It is actually a category term for certain buying for materials. So personal preference is not a legal reason to ban or not use a scent. Education is required. What scents to be worn, understand sensitivities occur. Productivity, why scent is healthier in an environment than not. We're learning through the research that After COVID, when there was no smell, you actually kind of get some pretty unpleasant smells just by the body odors. And by not using smell, we also are noticing that, for example, if your kitchens are on different floors, then when you're serving the meals to seniors, they can't smell the food being prepped, and it doesn't stimulate appetite stimulation. So not being around the cooking process actually has a negative impact on the senior who doesn't feel like eating because they're not around it, and then all of a sudden it's presented to them. We know scent impacts feelings emotionally and physically, and the current environments that lack of scent can actually create an environment that is more susceptible to a scent sensitivity. So what we're seeing is when you remove all the smells or try to, or eliminate, or create an environment as much as you can, odor comes in, and odor actually creates more of an agitation. And then you actually drop your threshold that even a small amount of scent becomes so empowering. Allergy testing versus scent sensitivity is something that I would definitely specify on a scent-free policy. And when I'm talking back about lack of scent can actually create an environment that's more susceptible to scent sensitivities, I have noticed recently I've been doing a lot of in-person work in some of the long-term care homes with some of the clients that I'm dealing with. And right now, my sister is in a convalescent home under rehabilitation because she had a terrible accident. And I'm working with one of the homes, and it's on the rehabilitation where I normally work with long-term care. And so they never really implemented scent or scent therapy. And we have been starting to do scent therapy with my sister. And so more of the residents are coming into the room. And I have overheard that the residents know I'm coming because of the scent, and they smell me, which is kind of funny because I have no personal negative, like, I just think that's great. And the last session we did, Caroline, one of the residents, said, I love when you come because I can smell something. And normally we can't smell anything. And one of the research that we just finished in an intake form, specifically with long-term care, is over 73% of the residents have they can't smell very well, which means they can't taste very well. And until you increase their sense of smell, which you can, but until you do that, they're not getting the benefits of utilizing scent. But then this is the reason why when we spoke at the beginning, where 50% are showing up with scent sensitivities in seniors, it's because of the threshold. They haven't actually expanded because their environment is not around these smells. So they're not getting these smells. And so what's happening is there's almost a negative impact by limiting scent in certain environments. So one of the big things is education. This is a talk I did to Baycrest in Toronto, and we were talking about scent, and anxiety. I have a TED Talk, obviously. We are on LinkedIn, and I have a group called the Olfactive Group that we started over 15 years ago. Some of the top researchers in the world are constantly putting research papers in there. And then we have YouTube videos where we're putting talks like this up, and I'm consistently educating. So this was,
401. Which I just this morning. And the traffic is outrageous. You have a panic attack. What do? You take rest. But if you had a bit of chamomile in the car, if you're prone to it, and you put it on a cotton ball and you stuck it in the vent, and you're driving, you gotta keep your eyes open, and you're just taking deep breaths, smelling this. What the chamomile does is it causes the brain to shift. It doesn't help stop the panic attack. It helps you get in control of the panic attack. There's a big difference. So this is something that is a wonderful tool, simple.
So this is some of the training I've been doing, but I have been teaching for a long time. It's obviously my passion. It's my work. I completely understand, I understand completely how scent works and how it creates emotional charges. I have scented airports. I created the first olfactive scent art exhibit at Nuit Blanche in Toronto. I have been working with scent for 35 years, and so I'm very much aware of how to do this, how to do it effectively. But to create a scent policy that just eliminates because we don't like Chanel No. 5, for example, or Polo because it reminds us of our ex-husband or whatever, that is not really the definition of how a policy should be created. It's not like a smoke-free policy where you ban a substance known as tobacco or marijuana. That's a policy. It's understood. You can't use a certain type of material and that it's off limits. You can't do that with a scent policy because you can't ban a scent. So my objective today was to provide you some education, to open your eyes to the other side, and to hopefully update your policy. By all means, I would not recommend not removing it and not having anything, because then you go back to the pendulum where you have some employees that would wear Chanel No. 5 to work. And you shouldn't, to be honest with you. When you wear perfume, it's supposed to be within a personal space of literally 1 foot around you, if that. And to obtain that is literally 1 to 2 drops on your body within your personal space. That's how you wear fragrance. Generally, that's how it's manufactured. Most people can't smell it, so they and they put on tons, and then they put it on their clothes and they spray their hair, and then they become, they're overusing it. But that's an educational component. And so you can't really spend the time with every employee and say, how are we going to educate them to wear perfume? And so you can say alcohol-free based fragrance, which then will eliminate eau de toilettes, that would eliminate parfums, and that would eliminate those raw materials that would then create issues, because we know that that's where you would have user issues. When you're creating your scent policy, you can then specify what types of smells or raw materials. So if you're on a procurement standpoint where you're buying cleaning products, they know what they're looking for, no phosphates, for example. And if you start to specify this, then what it does is things like essential oils. And I see Sandy is on the call today. She works at Responsive Care Management here in Ontario. And we do a lot of work with her teams, and she sees the advantages and the benefits with sleep and smell and appetite stimulation and anxiety. And this program, what we've been working on, we have been implementing it, but we don't scent rooms. We don't put it through HVAC. We work with scent sticks, and we do one-on-one therapy as you would with music. And if you put music into a room and you put AC/DC and you cranked it up, it wouldn't be a very nice living environment for the seniors. But if you had a jazz at a very nice, mild, low temperature, low volume in a room, it's quite pleasant. And it's how to use this. And it's no different with smell. It's using it properly. It's using it professionally. We focus on a science-based backing. We only use science, so it's research-driven. We don't use every scent out there because some smells are not. I do know for a fact any kind of rose-based smells usually trigger scent sensitivities in individuals, because 75% of the raw materials used in most perfumes or eau de toilettes or female colognes have a rose material because it's the cheapest synthetic to produce. And so it's always a base. So that's why certain smells smell the same. And that's why certain perfumes smell the same. So I am more than willing to help each and every one of you on the call if you would like me to provide you some input on changing the policies or updating them. I've done this with Baycrest here in Toronto, which had a very strict, and there was in the video teaching them, and we were using it, but they had a very, very strict policy, almost like on a hospital level. And I've worked with the Region of Peel here in Toronto, in Brampton, and even though they have a scent policy themselves, the doctors and caregivers understand there's a difference between the cancer wards, for example, as well as within the dementia ward. So there's different ways that we can do this. And if it's presented as a tool and with the guidelines, then therefore it's easier. Plus it's also easier to enforce. And then if you have an employee that violates it, which there has been lawsuits regarding that, then, and the company is lost, by the way, because it's against, from the charter, it's a personal right. And it's such a legal mess, to be honest with you. But if that's the case, you have a guideline. You can then refer it to almost like a smoke-free policy where you're removing something in particular. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people who use essential oils personally. It's a $1 billion industry in Canada. They are fragrance raw materials. We use them in synthetics. We take them and add them, and it's a chemistry, it's a chemical. But there's also a natural industry that happens to use them as well. And they have treatment programs and they do some really interesting things with them. And some people choose to wear patchouli, for example. That's a very strong scent. So I'm going to, if you have any questions, it's just before 2, and I try to make sure that we stay on target. If you have any calls or you want the policy, please email me. I'm going to put my email directly in here. I want to say thank you very much for joining me today. I know it's a lot of information. I try to take chemistry and break it down as simplistic as I possibly can without missing the points. I am fortunate that I will be coming out to your organization out west. For some of you, I see that you're on the call. And I will be speaking about this in more detail. And if you would like to have a specific one-on-one conversation with me, please do. Does anybody have any comments or questions or anything? Do you want to put something in the chat, or would you like a copy of this when I put it on YouTube for your teams? Is there something I can do further to assist you? Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Patricia, the comments. I'm looking forward to coming out and working with your teams. As I said, Sandy's on the call, and we do a lot of great work with her and her teams. So I will give you the YouTube link after, just in case you want to share it. And again, if I can help you in any way, please let me know. Thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic day, and we will see you again at another time soon. Bye, everyone.